My father left everything to me. Now my mother says I was never his son. I am a man of 32. The day of the will reading, my mother stood up, pointed at me in front of our whole family, and said I was not my father's son. She said my father had spent his life lying, and that I was the proof of that lie. She said I had stolen everything from her. I remember feeling my throat close. A few minutes earlier, I was just a grieving son. In one sentence, she turned me into an intruder in my own family. The lawyer had just finished reading the will. My father had left me the house, the repair shop, and most of his savings. My mother had a lifetime monthly allowance, and the right to live in the house as long as she wanted. My sister Claire had a smaller share of money, plus some personal things. It was not unfair. My father had always said the house and the shop would end up with me, because I worked with him, but nobody knew he had already put it in writing. When the lawyer closed the file, there was a short silence. I felt guilty, almost ashamed, even though I had not written a single word of that document. My mother's face went hard. She asked the lawyer to repeat the part about the house. When he did, she stared at me with a look I had never seen before. She said loudly that this will was wrong. Then she said she understood now, that everything made sense, that I was not even her husband's son. She said that my father had always refused to do a DNA test, and that now she knew why. She said I had manipulated him while he was sick, that I had taken advantage of his weakness. She said she would not let a stranger walk away with everything her husband had built. The room changed in 1 second. My aunt looked at me like I had grown a second head. My uncle moved his chair away, as if I could infect him. Some cousins avoided my eyes. Claire sat frozen. She whispered my name and told our mother that she was going too far, but her voice was weak. My mother ignored her. She kept repeating that she wanted a DNA test, and that she would contest the will. The lawyer tried to calm her, and said there were legal steps if she disagreed. She answered that she would do whatever it took. I felt like I was falling. Until that day, I had never questioned the fact that Mark was my father. He was strict, distant sometimes, but he was there. He taught me practical things. He helped me get my first car. He let me work with him when I lost my last job. He was not the kind of man who said he loved you, but I felt it in the way he showed up when it mattered. Growing up, my mother and I never had that kind of bond. She was attentive with Claire, always touching her hair, talking about her future, showing her off to friends. With me, it was different. She often reminded me that I had to be strong, that I should not complain, that boys had no right to be fragile. When I made mistakes, she told me that I disappointed her. When I did well, she said that was normal. I told myself it was just her way of raising a boy. I did not see more behind it. Now, sitting there with everyone staring, all those moments came back. The coldness, the distance, the way she sometimes looked at me like I was a problem, not a child. After the reading, I left the room as fast as I could. Outside, some relatives tried to talk to me. One cousin told me that my mother was in shock. He said I should not take her words seriously. Another asked if there was something I needed to tell them. He asked if I had ever done a DNA test. I felt anger rising. I told him I had never had a reason to question who my father was. He looked unconvinced. Later that evening, alone in my apartment, I read the messages on my phone. There were many. Some were supportive. Others were full of doubts. One message came from my mother. She wrote that she would never accept this will. She wrote that she was sure I was not my father's son, and that she would prove it. She blamed me for everything. She said I had destroyed her life. I stared at that message for a long time. My father had been dead for 10 days. I was still waking up thinking I had to call him to ask a question about the shop. Now my own mother was telling me I did not belong. The next day, Claire came to see me. She looked exhausted. She said that our mother had spent the whole night crying and talking. She said our mother kept repeating that she had always felt something off with me, that she had never felt the same connection with me as with Claire. She said she had once told my father that sometimes she felt I was not hers. According to Claire, my father had told her to stop saying that and had refused to continue the conversation. That detail hit me in the stomach. It was not just a crazy sentence at the funeral. It was an old obsession. My mother had carried this idea for years, and my father had shut it down instead of explaining anything. I asked Claire if she believed what our mother was saying. She said she did not know. She said she had grown up with me, and I was her brother. But she also said that our mother looked convinced. She said our mother was now sure that my father had lied to both of us, and that the will was proof that he had prepared something behind her back. A few days later, the lawyer called me. He told me that my mother had contacted him to contest the will officially. She wanted an expert to evaluate my father's mental state in his last months, and she wanted a DNA test. The lawyer asked me if I was ready to go through that. I told him I did not understand anything anymore. He said gently that my father had been very clear and calm when he prepared the will. He said my father had seemed determined. When he used that word, Something clicked in my head. Determined. My father was not impulsive. If he had made strong decisions, he had reasons. I thought of my grandmother, my father's mother. She had always been quieter but very lucid. I called her. When she picked up, she sounded tired. I told her what had happened at the will reading. She sighed and said she had always feared that the truth would explode the wrong way. She said she had told my father that secrets rot families. I asked her directly if I was my father's biological son. She paused. Then she told me that for her, I was her grandson, and that nothing could change that. She added that my father had prepared something for me, and that I would probably find it in his office. Then she told me to be careful and hung up. Her answer scared me even more. She had not said yes. She had not said no. She had just jumped to that letter. It felt like confirmation. The next morning, I went to my childhood home. My mother was not there. She had gone to see another lawyer. Claire let me in and followed me to my father's office. This room had always been his territory. Papers, tools, folders, receipts. Now it felt like the last place where he existed physically. I started opening drawers, checking old folders, moving things around. I felt almost guilty, but my grandmother's words kept repeating in my head. After about 30 minutes, I found a small envelope with my first name written on it. The handwriting was my father's. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was dated 6 months before his death. In the first lines, my father wrote that if I was reading this, it meant he had not been brave enough to tell me everything face to face. He admitted that he had been a coward. He wrote that he loved me, and that nothing in that letter changed that. He said I had to remember that while I read the rest. Then he wrote the words I had always feared, but never imagined as real. He wrote that, biologically, I was not his son. I read that sentence again and again. It felt unreal. He explained that, when my mother got pregnant with me, their marriage was already fragile. They had problems, arguments, frustrations. One day, she had disappeared for a weekend without explanation. When she came back, she told him she needed a break, that she was confused, that she was tired of his distance. A few weeks later, she told him she was pregnant. My father wrote that he had wanted to believe it was his child, but he admitted that doubt had been there from the beginning. He said he had pushed that doubt down because he wanted to save the marriage, and because he wanted a child. When I was born, he said he did not feel an immediate connection. He felt fear instead, fear that one day the truth would destroy everything. He wrote that, when I was around 8, my mother had one of her crises, and told him that she sometimes felt I was not his son. She said she did not see him in me. My father had shouted at her to stop, then left the room. That night, he went to a lab and did a secret DNA test using a hair from my brush, and his own sample. The result came back, there was no biological link. I read that part 3 times. My father had known since I was 8. He had known for almost 25 years and had never said a word. He wrote that, when he saw the result, he sat in his car for hours. He wanted to leave, to run away, to break everything in the house. But then he thought of me. He thought of how I followed him around in the garage. He thought of the way I looked at him when he fixed things. He decided that I was already his son, and that biology did not erase years of life. He threw the test in a box and went home. He never told my mother. According to the letter, my mother never knew for sure. She had doubts, she made comments, but she had never seen proof. My father kept the secret. He said he did it partly to protect me, and partly to avoid facing the truth about her, and about their marriage. He wrote that he never asked my mother who the biological father was. He decided it did not matter, but he also admitted that, deep down, he never forgave her. Their relationship became colder. They stayed together for the family, for appearances, for comfort. They slipped into a kind of quiet war. When I reached the middle of the letter, my vision blurred. I sat down on his old chair. I felt sick. Everything I thought I knew about my life was turning into something else. I was not the son he thought he had. He was not the father I thought I had, at least not by blood. My mother had cheated, got pregnant, and stayed silent. And she was now screaming in front of everyone that I was not my father's son, without even knowing it was actually true. The last part of the letter was about the will. My father wrote that he had decided to leave me the house and the shop because I had been there for him in his last years. I had helped him with the business, taken him to medical appointments, kept things running when he could not. He wrote that he knew my mother would react violently. He knew she would attack me and try to use the DNA against me, even if she had no proof. He wrote that he had left my mother a secure monthly income, so she could live without fear, and that Claire would also receive money. He was not trying to punish them, but he wanted to protect me from my mother's instability, and from the guilt he knew she would throw at me. He wrote that he could not fix everything he had broken by keeping this secret, but he wanted at least to give me something solid. Then came the worst line. He wrote that, if things got really bad, there was another envelope in the safe at the shop, with more details and documents, including a copy of the DNA result. He said that using it was my choice. He did not want to force me to explode the truth in Evrion's face. He begged me to think carefully, because that truth would destroy what was left of his marriage, and of the image our family had of him and of my mother. When I finished the letter, my hands were numb. My father had left me with a weapon, and a curse at the same time. If I used that letter and the DNA test, I could shut down my mother's accusations. I could prove that my father was not mentally manipulated, that he knew exactly what he was doing and why. But I would also reveal that my mother had cheated, lied, and spent years treating me like a stranger while hiding the real reason behind her bitterness. I heard a light knock on the doorframe. Claire was standing there. She asked me if I had found something. I told her that our father had left me a letter. She asked what it said. I told her that he had left me the house and the shop because he trusted me to manage them. I lied. I could not tell her the truth. Not yet. That night, back at my apartment, I put my father's letter on the table and stared at it for a long time. My phone kept vibrating. Messages from my mother. She said she had found a lawyer who agreed with her. She said they would force a DNA test. She said she would prove to everyone that I was a fraud pushed into their lives by her husband. My chest burned. I thought about answering, telling her that she was right, that I was not his biological son, telling her that the person who had lied and cheated was her, not me. Instead, I stayed silent. The next morning, I went to the shop. In the back room, there was a safe I had seen 1,000 times. My father had once told me the code when we started working closely together. My fingers shook as I entered it. Inside, among documents and some cash, there was a brown envelope with my name again. Next to it, there was a small plastic folder with lab logos. I opened the folder first. Inside, there was the DNA result from years ago. 2 names, mine and my father's. A small box with the words "No biological link." It was cold, clinical, final. Then I opened the second letter. This time, my father was even more direct. He repeated his love for me. He wrote that if I was reading this, things had probably turned ugly. He said he had prepared a written statement for the lawyer, explaining that he had done the DNA test by himself long ago, that he had known the result, and that his decision in the will was based on his own moral choices, not on manipulation. He said the lawyer had a copy of that statement in his files. He also explained one more thing. He wrote that my mother had once told him during an argument that she sometimes wished I did not exist, because every time she saw me, she remembered what she had done. He wrote that hearing that sentence had broken something in him forever. From that day, he decided that whatever happened in the future, he would make sure I would never be at her mercy. I felt anger I had never felt before. My mother had spent my whole childhood making me feel like I was not enough, blaming me for things I did not control, while hiding that I was the living reminder of her own betrayal. And now she was attacking me in public, blaming me for my father's decision, trying to erase me from the family by screaming about DNA she had never even tested. I left the shop with the letters and the DNA result in my bag. On the way home, my phone rang. It was my mother. I answered. Her voice was cold. She told me that her lawyer had advised her to demand a DNA test in court and to accuse me of manipulating a vulnerable person. She said she would do it. She said I could still avoid all that if I renounced the inheritance and gave everything back to her, and to Claire. In that moment, with my father's words echoing in my head, I realized the position I was in. If I stayed silent, my mother would try to crush me, use the system against me, paint me as a greedy stranger who took advantage of her sick husband. If I spoke and showed the truth, I would destroy her image, break Claire's heart, and change the way everyone saw my father and our family. I felt like, whatever choice I made, I would lose something important. When the call ended, I sat on my bed and finally understood why my father had written that he had been a coward. He had pushed the problem to the future. He had pushed it to me. In a few days, there would be the first legal meeting about the will, with my mother, her lawyer, my lawyer, and the notary. And I had to decide if I would walk in there with those letters and that DNA test, or if I would pretend that none of it existed and let my mother drag me through the mud. Either I protected her secret and let her destroy me, or I protected myself and destroyed her. That was the choice waiting for me when I closed my eyes that night. The days before the legal meeting felt unreal. I went to the shop, tried to keep it open, tried to act normal with clients, but inside I was somewhere else. Every time I caught my reflection in a window, I asked myself who I really was. My father's son by love and time, or a stranger who had been dropped into this family by a mistake and a lie. I kept replaying my mother's words from the funeral in my head. She had called me a thief, a stranger, a proof of my father's betrayal. She had stood in front of everyone accusing me without proof. At the same time, my father's letters kept repeating in my mind. He admitted his silence, his fear, his decision to stay and raise me. He had made me his son by choice, and he had also chosen to leave me everything, knowing exactly how my mother would react. On top of that, there was Claire. She sent me messages every day. She said our mother was unstable, that she cried and then insulted me, sometimes in the same hour. She said she did not know who to believe. She asked me if I knew something. I told her I could not talk yet, that I needed time. That answer was weak, and I knew it. The night before the meeting, Claire came to my apartment. She sat at my table, looked me in the eyes, and told me she felt abandoned. She said she felt trapped between her mother, who said she had been betrayed for years, and her brother, who stayed silent. She told me that our mother kept repeating that I was not my father's son, that she had always known it, that she had sacrificed her life for us, and now I was stealing the last thing she had. Claire said that, for the first time, she had started to wonder if maybe I was capable of manipulating someone. Hearing that from her hurt more than anything my mother had said. I asked her if she really believed I could do that to our father. She said that she did not want to believe it, but she was tired. She said she needed the truth, even if it hurt. Her eyes were red. Her hands were shaking. She asked me to respect her enough to stop acting like she was a child. In that moment, I realized I could not carry this by myself anymore. Keeping the secret was not just protecting my mother, it was also slowly destroying my sister. I told her that our father had left me a letter. I said the truth and it was heavy. I said it would change the way she saw our parents forever. She went pale. She asked if the letter said that I was not his son. I told her that yes, biologically, I was not his son. I said it in a flat voice, like I was reading a grocery list, because if I let any emotion out, I would break down. Claire covered her face with her hands. For a few seconds, she could not breathe properly. Then she asked how long our father had known. I told her he had known since I was 8. She sat in silence, absorbing that. Then she asked the question I had been avoiding, who was my biological father. I told her I did not know. Our father had never asked, or if he had never written it. Claire leaned back and said that this meant our mother had cheated, got pregnant, and then made both of us live in a lie for more than 30 years. Her voice changed. There was anger now. I told her about the DNA test, about the lab result, about the second letter in the safe. I told her about the sentence where our father wrote that our mother had once said she wished I did not exist. Claire looked like someone had punched her. She said she could not believe her mother had said that. Then she said that, at the same time, she could believe it, because she had seen the way our mother talked when she was angry. I asked Claire if she hated me. She shook her head and said that I was her brother, no matter what. She said she felt sick, not because of me, but because of our parents. She realized that her childhood had also been built on a lie, just a different one. She thought they had a complicated but loyal marriage. Now she saw something else, two people stuck together by guilt, fear, and appearances. I asked her what she wanted me to do at the meeting. She thought for a long time. Then she said she did not want me to throw our mother under the bus out of pure anger, but she also did not want me to let our mother ruin my life to save her image. She said our father had written those letters for a reason. She said that, if he had wanted the secret to stay hidden forever, he would have destroyed the DNA test. Instead, he had put it in a safe and left me the code. Her conclusion was simple. She told me that the truth was already destroying us from the inside. Hiding it was not protection anymore. It was torture. The next day, I walked into the notary's office with a folder in my hand. My mother was already there with her lawyer. She did not look at me. Claire sat between us, her face closed. The notary and my lawyer were on the other side of the table. The meeting started with cold formalities. My mother's lawyer said that they suspected manipulation and mental weakness. He said my mother was ready to demand a DNA test to prove I was not her husband's son, and that my father had been under my influence. He described my father as fragile and confused at the end. Every word felt like a stab. My mother kept her eyes on the table, letting him talk for her. When he finished, my lawyer spoke. He said that my father had come to him months before his death, fully conscious, very clear about his decisions. He said that my father had given him a written statement explaining that he had done a DNA test in secret years ago, and that he already knew I was not his biological son. He said my father had insisted that this truth would not change his moral responsibility as a parent, and that he wanted to protect me from the emotional consequences. My mother's head jerked up. She stared at him like he had insulted her. She said my father would never do something like that. She called him a liar. The notary stayed calm and said the statement was in his files. He took out a document with my father's handwriting, signature, and a date. Even from my seat, I recognized it. My mother's lawyer asked to see it. He read silently. His face tightened. He passed it to my mother. She read the first lines, then threw the paper on the table. She said my father had always been manipulative. She said he must have invented this story to justify giving everything to me. She said he wanted to punish her even after his death. That was the moment I opened my folder and took out the DNA result, and the 2 letters. My hands were shaking, but my voice was strangely calm. I said that my father had not invented anything. I said he had done the DNA test, and had kept the result. I said he had written to me months before he died, explaining everything. I put the documents on the table, and slid them toward the notary and the lawyers. Claire looked at me with tears in her eyes. My mother stared at the papers like they were poison. The notary inspected the result and the letters. He compared signatures. My lawyer confirmed that the handwriting matched the statement in his file. My mother's lawyer looked at the DNA result and asked where it came from. I told him it was from a private lab that my father had used when I was 8. I said he had kept it hidden and that I had only found it after his death, in the safe of the shop. My mother finally spoke, but her voice was different now. She sounded cornered. She said that this did not prove anything, that my father could have falsified the test. She said he had always been capable of going too far. She said he had always tried to make her feel guilty, and now he was doing it from beyond the grave. Then Claire did something I did not expect. She turned to our mother and asked her directly if she had cheated. She asked if there had been another man before my birth. She asked if she had ever told our father that I might not be his son. The room went silent. My mother refused to answer. She said it was none of our business. She said the past was the past. Claire insisted. She said that it was her business because that past had shaped our whole lives. She said she felt like a fool for believing in their marriage. My mother finally snapped. She said that, yes, she had made a mistake once, a long time ago, before I was born. She said she had been lonely, angry, ignored. She said she had slept with someone else. She admitted that, when she found out she was pregnant, she had not been sure who the father was. She said she had decided to stay with her husband and try to fix things. She insisted that she had paid for that mistake every day after. She said all of this not quietly, but in a rush, under pressure. There was no pride in her voice, only rage and shame mixed. The notary took notes. My mother's lawyer looked uncomfortable. My lawyer stayed silent. I felt my legs go weak. This was it. The truth was out, not only in a letter, but from her own mouth. My mother then turned on me. She said that I had no right to expose this. She said I had betrayed her. She said I had humiliated her in front of her child, in front of strangers. She said I was ungrateful. She said she had raised me anyway, even though I reminded her of her mistake every time she saw my face. I felt something break in me. I told her, in that same calm, flat voice, that I had not chosen to be born, that I had not chosen her actions, her lies, or my father's silence, that I had simply lived in the middle of their war without knowing the rules. I said that she was the one who had started this, by screaming at a funeral and by calling me a stranger. I said that if she had wanted the secret to stay buried, she should not have tried to erase me from the family. She did not accept any of that. She covered her ears for a second like a child, and repeated that my father had poisoned me against her even after his death. The lawyers then brought the conversation back to the legal question. The notary said that, from a legal standpoint, the fact that I was not biologically my father's son did not cancel the will. My father had recognized me, raised me, and left me his assets consciously, fully informed. The statement, the DNA result, and the letter showed that he was in control of his decisions. There was no proof of manipulation. If anything, there was proof of his own internal conflict, and his effort to protect everyone in his own twisted way. My mother's lawyer tried to argue that my father's emotional state, and the long-hidden secret could show instability, but the more he pushed, the more the documents in front of him worked against that argument. My father's writing was structured, coherent, aware of consequences. There was no trace of confusion, only guilt and determination. In the end, the notary said that my mother could continue to contest, but that, in his professional opinion, the will would probably stand. He advised her to think about the emotional cost of dragging this into a long legal battle, now that the truth was out. He reminded her that she still had a monthly income, and the right to live in the house. My mother looked at me with open hatred. She said that she could not live in a house that reminded her every day of this humiliation. She said that if I wanted everything so much, I could have it. She said she would rather burn the place down than share it with my memory. Then she walked out of the room before anyone could stop her. Claire followed her to the hallway, then came back a few minutes later, crying. She said our mother had refused to talk. She had just repeated that both of us had chosen our side, and that we should live with it. In the weeks that followed, my mother moved out of the house. She found a small apartment with the help of her sisters. From what I heard, she used her income to pay rent, and spent most of her time complaining about how betrayed she felt. She told everyone that my father had ruined her life, and that I had finished the job. She told some relatives that I was not even her child in her heart anymore. A few people in the family cut contact with me. They said the way I exposed the truth was cruel. They said I should have protected my mother. They said that even if she had made mistakes, I should not have used them against her, in front of strangers. They ignored the fact that she had dragged me toward a DNA test, and had called me a thief at a funeral. Others quietly supported me. They said I had just defended myself, that my father had left me with a mess, and that there was no clean way to handle it. My grandmother called me often. She never said she approved or disapproved. She just asked how I was sleeping, if I was eating, if I was managing the shop. Claire stayed between two worlds. She visited our mother and then came to see me. She told me our mother alternated between crying and raging. Sometimes she said she had ruined everything. Sometimes she said we had ruined everything. She refused therapy. She refused responsibility. She said life had punished her enough. I asked Claire once if she blamed me. She said she blamed everyone a little. Our mother for cheating and denying it. Our father for hiding the truth and putting the weight on us. Me for dropping all the documents on the table without warning. She said she understood why I had done it, but it still hurt. At the same time, she told me she would not cut me off. She said she had grown up with me. In her mind, I was still her brother. And she also said she could not unhear our mother's admission, or ignore my father's letters. The image of a perfect family was gone. What remained was something broken but real. Legally, after a few months, my mother's contestation collapsed. Her lawyer must have told her that there was no point. The will was confirmed. The house and the shop were officially mine. On paper, I had won. In reality, it did not feel like a victory. It felt like standing on the ruins of something that had already been cracked long before I was old enough to notice. I moved into the house. The first nights, there were heavy. I walked through rooms full of memories that now felt contaminated. Every object had another meaning. The table where we had eaten family dinners was also the table where my parents had pretended everything was normal. The corridor where my mother had scolded me for being ungrateful was also the corridor where she had walked around with this secret in her head, resenting my existence without ever admitting why. I tried to focus on the practical side. I kept the shop open. I hired a part-time worker to help me. The business slowly stabilized. Clients were loyal. Some of them told me they missed my father, and that he would be proud to see me running things. I nodded and thanked them. Inside, every time I heard that sentence, I felt a mix of warmth and pain. He would be proud, but he had also lied. He had protected me and betrayed me at the same time. My mother and I never spoke directly again. She sent a short message once. Months after the meeting, she wrote that she wished she had never met my father, and that she wished she had never brought me into her life. She said that every time she closed her eyes, she saw my face in his handwriting, and that she hated both. Then she told me not to contact her anymore. She said she had no son. I stared at that message for a long time, then deleted it. Not because it did not hurt, but because I knew reading it again and again would not change anything. She had made her choice. Sometimes I wonder, what would have happened if I had decided to stay silent? If I had accepted her demand, given her the house and the shop, and walked away, she would still be living in the family home, pretending to be a victim of an unfair will. She would still speak to Claire without that extra layer of shame. The secret would still be there, but it would be hidden again. I would be poorer, but maybe the family would look more intact on the surface. Then I remember the way she pointed at me at the funeral, in front of everyone. The way she told the world that I was not my father's son, that I was a thief, that I did not belong. She did that without proof, without hesitation, without thinking of what it would do to me. She started the war openly. I just finished it with the truth. Now I live in the house my father left me. I sleep in a room that used to be mine as a teenager. I wake up early, open the shop, and try to build something out of what he left. On the wall of the office, there is a photo of him and me in front of the shop, taken a few years ago. He has one hand on my shoulder. He looks tired but proud. When I look at that picture, I feel complicated things. He was not my biological father, but he taught me my trade. He stayed when he could have left. He chose to write those letters because he knew my mother would come for me. He tried to protect me, even if he did it in a way that threw me into chaos after his death. I resent him and I miss him at the same time. As for my mother, she is still out there, somewhere in a small apartment, telling her version of the story. In her version, she is the woman destroyed by a cold husband and by an ungrateful son, who exposed her worst mistake. Maybe she believes that version. Maybe she needs it to survive. For my sister, life goes on between two broken parents, and a brother who carries her father's name, and another man's blood. She told me once that, for her, what matters now is not DNA, but who shows up, when it counts. She said our father showed up, even with all his flaws. She said I show up too, when she needs help. She said our mother does not, at least not in the way a parent should. There is no clean end to this story. No forgiveness scene, no miracle reunion, just legal papers, 2 letters in a drawer, A D and a result in a folder, a business to run, and a family that exists in pieces instead of a whole. I got the house, the shop, and the money my father wanted me to have. But I also lost the mother I thought I had, and the simple story of my own birth. Every time I sign my last name on a form, I think of the man who gave it to me, and of the unknown man whose blood I carry. People say that the truth sets you free. Maybe they are right in some cases. In mine, the truth did not set me free. It just changed the cage. Follow me for more stories.